As the last sliver of light in a 1626 London midnight slanted across a lute score stained with ink, the entire city was immersed in a breathtaking silence steeped in misty dampness. In a study wrapped in heavy velvet curtains, the air thick with the scent of rosin and aged wood, an old man with snowy hair and eyes reflecting a profound sense of universal desolation sat quietly, opening his empty hands. He was not awaiting an audience with King Charles I. Instead, with fingers that had once moved the heartstrings of all Europe, he traced an imaginary chromatic scale of tears in the void. At 63, he was John Dowland, the most radiant yet somber musical saint of the Elizabethan era. This is a chronicle of how notes confront nothingness and how silence sublimates into nobility. The genesis of John Dowland's life held none of the typical royal musician's smoothness. Instead, it was a deep blue foundation woven from prejudice and ambition in the harsh climate of the late Tudor dynasty. As a genius possessed of a near-pathological obsession with pitch, he inherited a microcosm that was ruthlessly cold and fixated on religious alignment and social pedigree. In the London of those days, within oak-paneled chambers, he learned to capture the deepest rhythms of the soul with 11 strings. He eschewed the shallow forms favored by his peers, turning instead to the warm embrace of classical counterpoint from the continent. This near-obsessive pursuit of chromatic tension became the singular weapon that would later dazzle Europe, yet also the barrier that exiled him from his homeland. He understood that glory was no gift, but a prohibitively expensive transaction of talent. If his early travels were a pilgrimage to his artistic roots, then the years spent in the court of Christian IV of Denmark were the practical crucible that pushed Dowland's intellectual solitude to its absolute zenith. He received the highest salary in all of Europe and occupied the most palatial of chambers, yet in those quiet afternoons, amidst the shadows of golden banquet halls, he felt a bone-chilling cold. To capture those intervals that could silence monarchs and move generals to tears, he forced himself into long periods of self-imposed isolation. This morbid lucidity, born of extreme intellect, rendered his choice of every note ruthlessly demanding, as if he were not merely composing, but building a silent tower toward the far shore through his melodies. In that moment, he was the most sober artisan in all of Northern Europe. The summit of power in the eyes of a musician is often manifested as the prestige of office. Dowland gradually realized that when he finally returned to the longed-for English court in his late 40s, he gained not only a belated title but a void born of seeing through the rise and fall of empires. In a modest, damp London apartment smelling of mildew, he silently proofread the culmination of his life's work, Lacrimae, or 7 Tears. He found that those courtly dreams, once grand and overbearing, possessed far less power than the faint vibration of a string beneath his fingertip. In the preface to his final collection, he mused, "I once believed music was meant to conquer the ear, now I find it is merely a point of convergence within the scarred fissures of memory, where the soul no longer falls." The final season of John Dowland was spent in a state of profound solemnity and a silence illuminated by the radiance of a sage. At the dawn of February 1626, the fine London rain fell soundlessly. The golden age of the lute was drawing to a close along with the sinking resonance of the strings, and he, the guide of melancholy, was to be buried in the dust of history. In his final conscious moments, he refused the suggestion of a grand mass, asking instead to be carried to the window to hear the tide of the Thames one last time. He closed his eyes and, with those hands that had mastered 10,000 rhythms, traced a final musical rest of diminuendo across his chest. In that moment, the bells of Whitehall did not ring, the cold river water carried away the master's last sigh. Even today, 400 years after his passing, the name of John Dowland remains the sole sanctuary for many a restless seeker in the dead of night. What he left behind was not a triumphal column piercing the heavens, but a spiritual template of self-restraint and the noble departure. He teaches us that even if your era is destined to collapse, the order within your heart is governed solely by your own perception of truth. He maintained absolute lucidity amidst absolute shadows, and absolute logic amidst absolute temptation. Beneath the site in London where history has smoothed away the edges, he remains in that posture of leaning his head to listen. Dowland's quiet vigil for melancholy has crossed the boundaries of geography and time, living on in every soul that yearns for reality. The saga of John Dowland thus draws to a slow close amidst the fading reign of London. He was never an opportunist who bartered art for fame, he was merely a weary soul who steadfastly refused to compromise with mediocrity. He reminds us that no matter how mundane or fragmented your life may be, inner tranquility is your only true and eternal refuge. Just as he sat through the coldest winter nights, clutching a guttering candle to find a fulcrum for existence within the void through the temperature of his fingertips. May the serenity and vastness of Dowland become the softest feather in your dreams, carrying you toward that most peaceful and expansive shore of the inner soul. Good night, and may your dreams be fair.